Welcome to Feminist Question Time, brought to you by Women's Declaration International, which is the leading global organisation defending women's sex-based rights against the threats posed by gender identity ideology. Many of us have been active feminists since the 70s or even the 1960s, and we were not surprised when this new attack on women came along, and we haven't changed our analysis. So it means you're in a really good place. We're not surprised or confused or everything was fine. And we thought we were having a great life and we were busy doing our jobs, and we felt like things were fine. We've been very, very radical feminist since the 60s or the 70s, and we're very critical about what's happening in society. We see this as an extension and a deepening of patriarchy's attack on women, rather than just a big surprise like, oh, we had no idea about this. Many of us have read Janice Raymond's The Transsexual Empire, which was written in 1979 and forewarned us about these sorts of issues of men saying that they're mothers and that they're women and wanting to take the credit for creativity and motherhood. And then also Gynecology, Mary Daly, and then Sheila Jeffrey's fantastic works, Gender Hurts, um, in the early 2000s. So, as we say, we weren't surprised. In 2018, WDI wrote a declaration on women's sex-based rights, much of it written by Sheila Jeffreys, who I've just mentioned, and it lays out our position and our concerns about the threats posed by gender identity ideology. It's been signed by 39,694 people from 160 countries and is supported by 547 organisations. It's used to lobby governments, international organisations, and local organisations, and to establish a very clear position of how we can defend women's sex-based rights against this attack. So if you haven't read it or you haven't signed it, do have a look at it. It's on our website. We have volunteer activists, including country contacts from every continent, so you can join us. You could be part of WDI, help our work, come along to conferences, network locally, and then, come to these webinars, of course. So have a look on the website. This Zoom that we're in now is a women-only webinar, and we ask men to watch later on YouTube. So if you are a man, please leave the webinar and come back, watch it on YouTube. That would be fine, but not in this actual Zoom. We've got subtitles. You can use them to make things clearer if you want to, and you can press on that button. Our program today is we're going to have Karla Mantilla from the USA. And her talk is the ways that the LGBT movement, being overtly and covertly a gay male movement, set the stage for transgenderism. Then we're going to hear from Annie Gouilleux, from France, about why she signed the Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights and what's happening in France. Then we're going to hear from Karen Browne, who's from Ireland, about signing the declaration, and it was some really interesting stuff that Karen's involved in and working on in Ireland, and insights into what's going on in Ireland. And then we're going to hear from McGee from USA, similarly about signing the declaration and what's happening in her neck of the woods, which is Minnesota, in the United States, and how she sees this struggle and what's going on. So our first speaker is Karla Mantilla, and I'm just going to get Karla's bio up. So Karla Mantilla, welcome. She is a long-time feminist who cut her teeth on feminist activism and theory as a collective member of Off Our Backs News Journal. She taught sociology, research methods, and statistics at a variety of colleges and universities in the Washington, D.C., and surrounding area. She worked for nearly 18 years as the managing editor of an academic women's studies journal. Throughout her tenure there, she witnessed a field of academic women's studies devolve into something unrecognizable, but also has witnessed the LGBT movement and the gay movement for very, very many years, and has this really interesting insight into it being a covertly gay male movement, which set the stage for transgenderism. So it's lovely to see you, Karla, and I've been really looking forward to your talk. So I'm just going to hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Joe. And that was a wonderful introduction. Really, really great. So could I have the PowerPoint, please? I'm going to be talking today about what I call How Did We Get Here? The LGBT movement and transgender ideology. I did give this talk before at the WDI USA convention in Atlanta in 2024. I've reworked it a bit, but in case it seems familiar, that may explain why. Next slide, please. So how did the transgender ideology gain such a foothold so quickly? I think there are several factors that paved the way. One is in academia, postmodernist theory gave way to queer theory, which created gender studies. I talked about this in greater detail last week at Feminist Question Time. In a quick nutshell, the basic ideas are that there's a rejection of reality and truth, an overvaluation of subjective experience over the material world, and a focus on an individualistic worldview, a refusal to acknowledge social patterns. Everything is individual. Like Margaret Thatcher said, there's no such thing as society. Only individual women and men who can do anything, no patterns at all. In that view, men are no more likely to rape and murder than women are. It's all individuals. There's no such thing as male pattern violence. I noticed this take in the recent video debate between Julie Bindel and Helen Weberly. And Weberly kept saying that it's people who are victims of sexual abuse. People commit rape. You can't make a generalization as to the gender of any of rapists or people who are raped. So that's one area, how we got here. Another one is the apolitical ideology of psychological theory and psychological therapy. There's the idea of my truth, your truth, but no actual material reality in the outside world as the truth. There's the focus on the primacy of feelings, which are often seen as arising solely from the individual, devoid of social context and unrelated to cultural patterns. So your feelings are just spontaneously generated. And then there's the idea of feelings being valid, which we've heard so much about. Ironically, valid is defined in one dictionary as having a sound basis in logic and fact. And that, I think, gives rise to the phrase feelings just are. I mean, obviously, some of this is sensible, but there's a certain aspect of the apolitical ideology embedded in this that I think has helped pave the way for transgender ideology. A third factor is capitalism and the ways increasing technology has led to the commodification of people. So we've created the possibility for altering human bodies as a way of remedying your personal dissatisfaction. Plastic surgery, liposuction, Botox, breast augmentation, labiaplasty. All these things are, seen as the solution if you feel bad about yourself. Obviously, that would lead to transgenderism. Pornography and prostitution are also part of the commodification of people. And due to technology, there's a dramatic increase in the availability and access to pornography. Pornography, in particular, sissy porn, in which men are depicted as undergoing forced feminization, the eroticization of men who are made to act out being women by wearing feminine dress, makeup, showing sexual submissiveness. Many trans-identified men say that sissy porn led them to transgenderism. But what I'm going to talk about today is the lesbian and gay rights movement and how that became co-opted by gay men. Next slide. I believe that the lesbian and gay movement has been turned into, How did lesbian and gay rights morph into transgender ideology? The gay rights movement was growing at the same time as feminism was declining, both in academia and in feminist circles. I believe there was a decline due to a backlash. After women have made significant gains, there's often a backlash against women and women's rights after women have gotten somewhere. So after the first wave, women accomplished the right to vote, the rights of married women to own and manage property, more access to education. This took place in the early 1900s, culminating around the 1920s. Again, this is in, the United States and Western Europe. However, in a few decades later, by the 1940s and 50s, there was widespread cultural backlash against women. Women's lives were depicted at that time in magazine, radio, television, as solely being centered around just being a wife or a mother. Then the second wave came about. Women achieved great gains during the second wave, gains in employment, the right to enter male-dominated professions, a little bit better equality of pay. Women achieved greater awareness of things that were previously invisible, like marital rape, date rape, or stalking. Rape in general was brought into more awareness, and there were rape crisis centers, new laws for rape convictions, greater awareness about domestic violence shelters were created, laws were passed to enhance protections against domestic violence, and abortion rights, which were made much more available. But there's been a backlash against them, and you can certainly see that in the United States, where we recently lost a federal guarantee of abortion rights, although some states still allow them. So at the same time that gay rights were ascending, there was an increasing backlash against feminism. That resulted in lesbian feminist thinking and activism turning away from feminism and toward gay activism. Lesbians began to identify more with being gay than with being women. So they allied themselves toward gay rights more than towards women's rights. But gay men are still men and are therefore male identified. And gay rights has been co-opted by gay male ideology. Next slide, please. What do I mean by gay male ideology? I'm going to talk about 3 ways the gay rights movement is informed by gay male ideology, how the basic foundational principles of the gay rights movement are grounded in gay men's experiences and priorities. I don't think this was done overtly or with any malicious or conspiratorial intent. It's just an artifact of the fact that gay men are men. So although gay male ideology is not overt or open and openly espoused, it's embedded in the very premises on which the gay rights movement has been based, and it's reflected in their priorities and goals. So the first male-centered idea that is foundational to the gay rights movement is that gender or sex role nonconformity has nothing to do with or is irrelevant to being gay. Just a note, I use gender nonconformity, although sex role nonconformity is perhaps more accurate. And here I use gender to mean enacting stereotypical sex roles. In gay male ideology, being gay is only and exclusively seen as about same-sex attraction. It has nothing to do with not conforming to heteronormative gender roles. Although even that, as an aside, is being twisted lately as trans rights activists are trying to change being gay as about being attracted to opposite sex role stereotypes, opposite as being attracted to femininity or masculinity rather than men and women. The second idea embedded in gay male ideology is that gay liberation is seen as synonymous and coterminous with sexual libertarianism. So sexual libertarianism is embedded in gay rights. Sexual libertarianism is the idea that people, mostly men, have the right to have any kind of sexual activity, however and whenever they want, without regard for others or for any harm that may be experienced by the objects of their sexual use. The third idea that I believe is foundational to gay male ideology in the gay rights movement is that inclusion, without exception or reservation, is a paramount goal or value of the gay rights movement. Next slide, please. The first idea that gender nonconformity is irrelevant to being gay. So gay people are seen as just the same, exactly the same as heterosexuals. The only difference is a same-sex sexual attraction or orientation. The idea is that being gay does not involve resistance to sexist, heteronormative sex roles. Being gay is portrayed as not related or even correlated to gender nonconformity, except it is. Empirically, it's obvious to most of us that many gay people are gender nonconforming. That's what gaydar is about. People often identify gay people by their gender nonconformity. Lesbians, sensible shoes and short hair, no makeup. Gay men having a swish in their walk or being interested in the theater or performing arts. All gender nonconforming things. It's been a truism that kids who don't conform to stereotypical gender roles are gay and will grow up to be gay. It's important to note too that by here, when I'm talking about gender nonconformity, I don't just mean vestiture or outward appearances. It can include personal interests and personality characteristics as well. So lesbians often, while maybe presenting in a more feminine way, they can resist heteronormative gender stereotypes such as being incompetent, an ornament, a support person for others. A gender nonconforming trait for women, in addition to the way we look, can be being analytical, intelligent, capable or competent, strong, assertive, outspoken, a leader. These are all forms of gender nonconformity as well. So those are certainly seen throughout lesbian culture. However much gender nonconformity is related to being gay, the gay right movement downplays it. I imagine it's like the great crazy aunt in the attic of the gay rights movement, where she's up there and she's making a lot of noise, but we're all pretending she's not there. Next slide. Since gender nonconformity is not acknowledged, there's the feminist analysis of gender nonconformity is suppressed. What's important about being gender nonconforming is that it is a form of resistance to stereotypical heteronormative gender roles. This resistance is foundational to feminism and to the liberation of women from gendered stereotypes, from restrictions, and the subordination of women through enforced adherence to those stereotypical gender roles. But because gender nonconformity is not acknowledged, the potential feminist consciousness that could arise from gay identity, especially lesbian identity, is suppressed. I think it's interesting that gender nonconformity has actually been increasing in the past decades or so, but there's no feminist lens with which to understand or make sense of it. Therefore, transgender ideology is an attempt to make sense of gender nonconformity without feminism. Because the gay movement has disavowed gender nonconformity, being transgender or non-binary have simply become code words for being gender nonconforming. Next slide. I do want to have one caveat to this. Not all gender nonconformity is about liberation, and some expressions of gender nonconformity are in fact about reenacting regressive and sexist stereotypes. Without a political analysis, there's no way to discern between liberating forms of resistance and re-entrenching harmful gender or sexual stereotypes. Some gender nonconformity is about women taking power back from men, assertiveness, confidence, competence, independence. Some is about reclaiming man's ability to be soft and sensitive or have their emotional side, rejecting the imperative to be strong, stoic, and invulnerable. However, celebrating hyperfemininity and hypermasculinity in dress and appearance, such as that expressed in drag queen performances, is not furthering liberation, but it's re-entrenching negative sex stereotypes. Negative sex stereotypes, female sex stereotypes can be seen as being an object, helpless, passive, subordinate, defenseless. Those are not good things. Negative male sex stereotypes, being tough, unfeeling, violent, aggressive, objectifying others. So some forms of gender nonconformity, such as when a man takes on the negative aspects of femininity or a woman takes on the negative aspects of masculinity, are not liberatory. They are embracing or re-entrenching a dominant subordinate paradigm, and they are regressive, not liberatory. Next slide, please. The second way gay male ideology has influenced the gay rights movement is the incorporation of sexual libertarianism as a fundamental value. So gay liberation has become synonymous with sexual libertarianism. Gay men are still men and hold attitudes of male domination, and I think it's important not to forget that. Men are socialized to disassociate sex and sexuality from emotions and feelings, and this happens to both straight and gay men. Part of training into masculinity and male dominance is learning to be strong and invulnerable. There's also a cultivation and celebration of sex as detached from emotions, intimacy, and connection, and even as a means of asserting dominance and control over others. So sexual libertarianism involves subscribing to the right to sexual pleasure without concern for the well-being of others. It leads to such things as sexual objectification of others for one's own use, with little or no regard for the other person or people involved. It also leads to things like transactional and meaningless sex and a celebration of promiscuous and anonymous sex. Since male sexuality is shaped as detached from emotions, sexual libertarianism has no way to acknowledge sexual harm, because that harm derives from how people, women, feel. Sexual libertarianism evokes freedom to sexually exploit others without consequences, and it arises more from gay male culture than lesbian culture. Although unfortunately, many lesbians have taken it on because it's what they think of as being gay. Next slide, please. Sexual libertarianism, then, has become a fundamental part of gay culture. Gay culture is seen as what I call glitter culture, which is about being sexually open and outrageous and being in publicly that way. It's typified in movies and TV shows with characters who are fabulous, frivolous, or vapid. All that is seen as being gay. If anybody has seen the American sitcom Will and Grace, the character Jack is exemplified by this kind of way of being. And that's what people think of as being gay. Being gay is about glitter and being fabulous. Well, that's hardly what lesbians are about for the most part. Drag queens are also embraced as emblematic of gay culture. Breaking down sexual taboos is seen as a fundamental part of gay liberation. I think that's why gay men have been vulnerable to including pedophiles in their movement, because without a feminist analysis, gay men are vulnerable to the claims of those who say they're a sexual minority, such as NAMBLA, the National Man-Boy Love Association, or now MAP, Minor Attracted People. It's important to note that these people are men. Men are the ones who are part of those organizations, not women. Gay culture, it leads to paraphilias, or sexual libertarianism leads to the embrace of paraphilias as part of diversity and inclusivity. Again, paraphilias are almost exclusively engaged in by men. There are open displays of nudity, kink, BDSM gear, furries, etc. at gay pride parades. Gay pride parades represent stereotypically male culture. But what is stereotypically lesbian about gay pride parades? Do they have potlucks? Do we have hiking, sensible shoes, U-Hauls? Those are all obviously stereotypical and perhaps, not necessarily lesbian things, but it's interesting to imagine what a gay pride parade would be if it was a primarily emerging out of lesbian culture. So there's an acceptance and even celebration of all kinds of sexual proclivities that has become a taken for granted part of the gay rights movement. There's no political analysis to account for the harms of paraphilias, sexual exploitation, and sexual objectification. There are no grounds to see the ways male sexuality can be and often is founded on a misogynistic and male-dominant worldview. And there's no basis with which to evaluate the oppressive or liberatory effects of the increasingly wide array of gender and sexual orientations or identities. Next slide, please. The third way that gay male ideology has co-opted the gay rights movements is a more subtle but nevertheless important. Inclusion is seen as a principal goal of the gay rights movement. Because gay men have been excluded from the privileges of straight men, inclusion is high on their list of priorities. They want into the one arena they have been left out of, male privilege. Gay men are loyal to male interests and they want access to straight male privileges. In addition, I think that there's a hypervaluation of inclusion in general, which I believe is the result of a misapplied model of oppression. Many of you will be familiar with Marilyn Frye's model of oppression that she talked about in her book, The Politics of Reality. And in that book, she talks about oppression being like a bird cage, and noting that if you have one or two bars, the bird can obviously fly around them. You need all the bars in place, which creates the web that's hard to escape from, or the cage for the bird. So oppression occurs when there are enough obstacles to create a web that is hard to escape from. However, people have come to think of discrimination as even the main or even the sole way that oppression occurs. I think that's where the problem is. Different oppressions, though, work differently. Sexism, racism, homophobia, classism, the bars of those cages are made up with different kinds of obstacles. Discrimination figures more prominently in some forms of oppression than others. Nevertheless, discrimination is seen as the defining paradigm of oppression. I believe the reason that discrimination is seen as coterminous or equal to oppression has to do with an overly simplistic misunderstanding of racism, at least as it has played out in the United States. Discrimination in public accommodations is a key, but far from only factor in racial oppression. The conceit among Americans is that racism was eliminated in 1964 because we passed the Civil Rights Act, which legally ended discrimination in public accommodations. So the idea is that racism is only about discrimination, and it was solved with the passage of this act. Many Americans love that idea. However, this leaves out other structural forms of racism, including environmental racism, school-to-prison pipeline, and the prison system in general, racial disparities in the legal system, systemic access to unequal resources, systemic unequal access to resources, including housing, food, education, jobs, healthcare, mortgages, and loans. All of that has resulted in dramatic disparities in net worth between African American and white Americans. All of those are the bars of the cage that form racial oppression. So the easy formulation becomes oppression equals discrimination. This formulation exonerates people from having to understand racism at a more systemic level, but it also simplifies other forms of oppression in people's minds. It leads to the conclusion, prominent in the gay rights movement, that all forms of discrimination or exclusion are always wrong and are tantamount to oppression. While women have experienced harm from discrimination, male violence, sexual objectification and violation, and control over women's reproductive capacity are also key factors in the oppression of women. Inclusion is important at times, but where physical or other vulnerabilities are at stake, it is not necessarily a path toward liberation. Inclusion puts women in harm's way. In addition, I think women have a special need to wanting time and space away from men to raise consciousness about what it's like to be women in a patriarchal world and to experience the physical safety that women can only have when men are not around. Also, women are the only group who are completely embedded with our oppressors in all aspects of our life, from birth, in the family and intimate relationships, except for lesbians or lesbian separatists, throughout our lives, homes, and workplaces. So space away from the oppressor is fundamental to any oppressed group, or in particular to women's ability to see more clearly how living in a patriarchal world affects us. Next slide, please. So how does gay male ideology lead to transgenderism? Gender nonconformity is not seen as part of being gay. Instead, gender nonconformity is seen as transgender identity. If you're gender nonconforming, instead of being gay, you're trans. Transgender ideology results when there's no way to acknowledge that gender nonconformity is often part of being gay, and when there's no feminist lens to understand that gender nonconformity is a form of resistance to enforce gender roles. Gay rights has left a giant vacuum by ignoring gender nonconformity that I believe has been filled by transgender ideology. And also, because transgender identity and because transgender identity and gender nonconformity are conflated and seen as the same thing, women who object to transgenderism are seen as rejecting gender nonconformity as well. So that's why transgender activists believe that we think men should be masculine and women should be feminine. I even saw one on X this morning saying, women are saying that I'm not a woman. A man was saying, women are saying I'm not a woman because I'm not feminine enough. But so many butch lesbians are feminine. So how does that make sense? Which we think men are supposed to be masculine and women are supposed to be feminine. That's why they think we're the same as social or religious conservatives who do reject gender nonconformity. They can't imagine that gender nonconformity is not the same as transgender identity. And they can't imagine that we think it's okay to not conform to gender stereotypes, regardless of the body you have, that we embrace gender nonconformity as part of rejecting oppressive gender roles. Another way that gay male ideology leads to transgenderism is that sexual libertarianism and sexual exploitation are seen as the same as gay liberation, which leads to an embrace of all sexual differences, paraphilias, and sexual minorities. They're all celebrated as part of sexual diversity. And this is embedded in the gay rights movement, in the way gay people think about the gay rights movement. This, of course, precludes an analysis of sexuality in terms of dominance and subordination, and in terms of conceptualizing sexual harm, a key factor in our oppression. Inclusion as a fundamental principle of the gay rights movement logically extends to being inclusive of people who say they're transgender. If inclusion is always good and discrimination is always bad, of course we have to include transgender people in everything. Inclusion as a fundamental principle, however, overrides women's safety and denies biological realities, such as in sports, pregnancy and motherhood, and other physical differences and vulnerabilities. Finally, the Born This Way narrative, which is endemic also in the gay male ideology, gives justification to people who feel they were born in the wrong body. We are seen as extremely hypocritical if we object to people saying they were born in the wrong body, if we say we were born gay. I'm not sure that many people know that the Born This Way narrative has tended to be more the gay male experience, and it was highly contested in the 1980s. Lesbians at that time talked a lot about having affectional preference as well as sexual preference, and that they talked about part of being a lesbian was about centering women and not men in our lives. Additionally, the Born This Way narrative, I believe, is based on faulty logic, because people often say, well, I knew I was gay from an early age, ever since I can remember. But we can feel and think things from an early, even pre-verbal age that are completely socially shaped. If your first language is, say, English, you spoke it from a very early age, even before you can remember, and yet we're obviously not genetically coded to speak any particular language. Next slide. So we end up with Lesbians align with gay men over women. Lesbian consciousness is often more in line with gay male interests and against women's interests. Lesbian feminist activism, which was prominent in the 1970s and 80s, changed to gay rights activism, supporting gay male rights over women's rights. This has led to lesbians supporting sexual libertarianism and the inclusion of sexual diversity without a feminist analysis. It's led to lesbians seeing prostitution and pornography as sexual freedom issues, not in terms of women's rights to be free from sexual assault, sexual objectification, and sexual degradation, all of which are inherent in prostitution and pornography. It's led to lesbians attending drag queen shows or strip bars with no consciousness of what those mean for women. It's led to lesbians believing in a transactional view of sexuality, seeing that as liberating, rather than a sexuality based on connection, intimacy, equality, dignity, and respect of self and others. It's led to lesbians cheerleading sexual paraphilias as part of sexual diversity, including autogynephilia, with no feminist consciousness as to what those practices signify in terms of the oppression of women. And finally, and most unfortunately, lesbians have come to think they are men simply because they do not conform to feminine stereotypes, because they reject being subordinated by taking on men's version of what femininity should be. I'm done.
Thank you so much, Karla. That's incredibly interesting. There's so much in that talk that I think that I certainly will listen to it again or um, watch it again. There's lots of really key ideas in there and lots of fantastic phrases. I really liked or found it very sort of thought-provoking, this idea which you really talk about how inclusion being fundamental to the gay rights movement. And are you sort of saying that the gay men basically liked the setup, let's say in the 1960s or something? They liked the way that patriarchy was running, it suited them, and they just wanted to be included as full members of the patriarchy and not be done for their sexual practices.
Yeah, they wanted to be full members of the male sex class. That they felt like they're men. They have everything. They just have this one little problem that they're gay. If they could just kind of jump into the male sex class, they'd be good, without any understanding or awareness that class is created as a part of a dominance against over women.
Yeah,
just
I mean,
awareness.
and it makes loads of sense. I mean, it seems to me that right, that gay men, they really like, one thing that they don't get as part of the sex class is they don't get women at home doing all the laundry and stuff, but they also don't get those little ego boosts that heterosexual men get. And so that's one reason why they love the drag queen in their culture, because they're sort of replicating it. So that would fit partly that with this, they like the femininity. They don't want to get rid of masculinity and femininity because it boosts their egos.
Yeah, and they don't understand femininity as part of an oppressive way of being in the world. They just think it's fun to play with it. It's a toy for them. It's obnoxious that they want to, like, I mean, the way Judith Butler talks about, playing with the signifiers, and without any understanding of the dominance and subordination, without any understanding, this is about power. It's about male supremacy. It's just fun for them. Just like it might be fun for someone to, oh, let me try cooking once a blue moon, rather than doing the cooking every day, which is a very different thing.
I mean, I've had a big argument. I've had one big argument with a gay man who basically, we were talking about all the transgender ideology, and he said, well, I just agree with you on all of this. I didn't know much about it, but we had a long conversation about it. And then we got on to the drag queen stuff, and he just went ballistically angry with me and said, Not going there. Just absolutely. I would never, ever, I'm never giving up the drag queen element of our male culture. But he was angry. It wasn't just, well, that's interesting
Hmm.
that you disagree with it. And been thinking about that a lot. Like, what is it that makes them angry when that's threatened? How fundamental is it to their enjoyment, their sex?
Well, I think it may be because I think gender nonconformity is a really interesting thing because, as I said, sometimes it's liberatory and sometimes it's not.
Mm,
I think gay men, and in fact many men, feel the strictures of straight male, performing that kind of stoicism and stuff. And so gay men being feminine is a little bit and I'm just making this up, so feel free to disagree, but it looks to me like it's part of them wanting to get out of the strictures of this, having to be a man and strong and tough. So they want to have the ability to break free from the male stereotype. But unfortunately, it's gone into a direction of drag queens, which is really not. It's not a good way to break free from male stereotypes. But yet, men cling very much to wanting to not have to always be in this trap of gender nonconformity, of gender conformity. But I think that because they don't have a feminist analysis, I think they cling to it because it's a desperate feeling when you feel that you must be in these enforced gender roles. But they haven't got a feminist analysis as to what would be breaking free and what
yeah.
just,
But I mean, I think it's just the S&M. It's the
oh,
they like the dom to be dominant, and they like the feeling of dominance that straight men get when they have a woman in their
that
house
could be,
performing
that makes sense.
femininity. So because they lack that, because they're all men, they like replicating that, and that
Oh,
fits very
that's a,
much with their
that's
sexual
brilliant.
practices. Yeah,
That's
I mean, I think
brilliant.
it's no, no,
So,
probably I sort of thought about it because of what Sheila's written. Sheila Jeffries has written in her analysis of unpacking queer politics and gender hurts. I've got another point that I've thought about when you were talking about this, but also I've sort of thought in the past that it's occurred to me that possibly lesbian liberation was an unintended, women's liberation, some women's space was an unintended consequence of the gay rights movement. And that
hmm.
it's occurred to me that possibly they sort of see it as, oh, sorry, like, oh, sorry, we didn't mean to help women. Like the gay liberation actually helped women quite a lot. And their support for
Oh,
trans is oh, sorry, we never meant to help women. We made a massive mistake. That was an unintended consequence. So we're going to really support trans. And then we can
oh,
have both things. It fixes a glitch. It frees gay men to carry on being superstar gay men, but it also puts women back in their place, particularly radical feminists.
oh,
So
I
it
love that.
absolutely gets rid of that, oops, we never meant to help women at all, and we're going to really push. Yeah. Do you think that makes sense?
I think that makes so much sense. I think that's a really good way of looking at it. It seems really accurate to
Yeah.
me.
Bankers. Well, look, I can't see any questions. I know some people might have done a question since we started chatting, but I can't see any actual questions. If there are questions, can you put them in the Q&A if you're people here or the women here? Put them in the Q&A, and then Karla will have a time to answer them. I think that was incredibly potent and sparky, and there was a huge, interesting chat. Certainly for me, it made me think of loads of ideas, and I think that's just brilliant. It was wonderful. So thank you so much, and we'll have to hopefully get you back on to carry on unpicking a lot of this and giving completely new insights into, that thing about particularly inclusion, but there were loads of bits of it. Okay, so what we'll do, let's go on to our other speakers and then give women a chance to ask questions to Karla, and then Karla will get you back on at the end to answer any questions. So our next speaker is Annie Gouilleux, who is French.
Yes.
See, I'm struggling to pronounce
No,
your
it's all
surname.
right. No, it's all right. Gouilleux. It's all right. It's
Oh, that's so
difficult.
difficult. Yeah. So Annie Goulieu is 77 years old. She lives on her own in Lyon, in France. She's a retired English teacher turned translator, and now she's come home to the radical feminist movement, or at least that's how it feels. And thank you so much, Annie, because you've been starting getting really involved in WDI. And so we wanted you sort of said you would come on and tell us why you signed the declaration, and then maybe tell us a bit about what's going on in France. So why did you
Okay.
sign, and what's happening in France, Annie?
Well, I thought I was going to tell you
Oh,
first
Annie,
how
is
I
it
got
possible to
there.
move your screen a little bit so we can see more of you? Yeah, or stand. Yeah, that's perfect. That's better, because it's nice for
Like that,
everyone to see
yeah.
you well. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I thought it would be better if I started by telling you how I came.
Yeah.
Briefly, I mean,
Yeah.
because unlike most of you, I've spent most of my life outside the radical feminist movement. And I'm sorry for it because I missed so much. I'm sorry for myself, actually, because you didn't miss anything, but I did. And I am, when I retired in 2008 from my teaching job, I had a once in a lifetime fit of megalomania, and I decided to retranslate a book called The Myth of the Machine by Lewis Mumford, who was an American. Well, it's difficult to put him in a slot really, because he was trans. He had lots of interest, historian, sociologist, everything. And The Myth of the Machine is a study. It's 2 volumes, and it's a study of of human development alongside techniques, and then alongside technologies, and it's a very pessimistic criticism of industrial society. So when I finished that, well, the first volume of my translation has been published, but the second one is still being reread, and it's dragging on. Anyway, after that, I started writing in the anti-industrial movement in France. And I worked with a small publisher called La Lenteur, which means slow, and that's how I met Maria Mies's work, which takes me to they asked me to translate her book, the book The Subsistence Perspective by Maria Mies and Veronica Benholt Thompson. And when I discover an author I like, I read all their books usually. So I read all of Maria Mies's books, and this is how I rediscovered feminism, really. And they asked me to have a look at Gina Correa's The Mother Machine, which I liked very much. And I did a long paper. It's not really a critical paper. It's meant to transmit the author's main thoughts, important things in the books to an audience, or to readers who won't be reading the book. So I translate parts of it, but not too much, because otherwise I have to ask for rights. So you can't translate the book like that. And I sort of paraphrase or resume the main ideas. So it's not critical work. I only do that with books I like or I think should be known. So they didn't want to publish my paper, basically because she talks about sex class. And that they refused absolutely. They're mostly blokes in that movement. And even
Who's they? Sorry, you probably told us.
alors,
Who's they?
la lenteur and the industrial movement thing.
So you were
They,
getting too feminist. You were becoming too feminist.
well, I had to break up with them because, and I think I've lost a few pounds in there, but never mind. So I thought that this thing, sex class, was very important. And for me, it was new, but it was important. So I said, no, no. If you don't want to publish that, I'll find somewhere on the web. And so now I publish these papers I do on a friendly website that's called lesruminants.com. If you and
Put it
I
in the
rumin
chat. I'll put it in the chat because you
yeah,
gave it to me. Yeah.
okay. And well, Anna Minsky is an archaeologist too, and she's got a lot of other interesting things on her website as well. So far, I've done Gina Korea, Mary Daly's Gin Ecology, Janice Raymond's A Passion for Friend, I've just finished. It'll be going up in a moment. Francine Sporenda's La Mystification Patriarcale, part of it. And one of your texts, Joe, Joe Brew's Easy Way to Give Up Patriarchy, which I found very useful, and it was funny too, so I liked it. And now I'm going to reread all Sheila Jeffrey's books and read the ones I haven't read, try to do something about all these books. And in the meantime, while I'm rereading, I'm translating her text on political economy that she's published on her website.
Yeah, that's
And
fantastic.
I found very interesting. So that's all. And in the meantime, now that's sorry talking about myself.
No, it's really interesting, and that's getting a load of different ideas into the French language.
yeah,
So
and
it'll be very
you know
helpful. And you're in touch with
what?
WDI France, aren't you?
Oh
So
yes, I did all.
they'll know about all that. Yeah.
My first paper actually was Aurora Linnea's Man Against Being, which I found really excellent. And that was the first one Anna published. And now I'm also working with WDI France. I managed to, and we are specifically working on a law that the LFI, the extreme left party wants to push through parliament. I don't know if it's going to be examined or anything, because there's quite a lot of problems, so many problems
And
in
is that quite a pro-trans
it's a
policy
pro-trans,
that
well,
the
they are
extreme left want?
pro-trans.
Yeah.
I mean, they've swallowed the ideology hook, line, and sinker, and they want to erase the mention male, female from the identity papers, from identity cards. I mean, and their argument is so ridiculous. They say that it's because you can see female on an identity card that women are discriminated against, which is
Yes.
so we we're going to have a go at them. I mean, make them look ridiculous on social media. I'm not going to do this because I'm hopeless on social media, but we wrote a letter which we have to send to the oh, I forgot. Sorry, to our parliament,
Yes.
representative
And
in
I mean,
parliament.
I think it
Uh,
seems to be difficult in France because there is this
mm,
history of postmodernism, and the sort of
mm,
political philosophy
yeah.
often has been like Foucault and uh,
Oh yes.
paedophile apologists, and so it's a sort of difficult environment to be working in. But
Mm,
there's you, and then there's fantastic the ICAMs with Marie-Joseph de Villers. They've always been
yes.
doing
Yeah.
brilliant work
Mm,
on surrogacy,
mm,
and WDI and New Femme, and
mm.
this, yeah.
And they've got quite nice podcasts about a lot of women, which they do about what I'm doing right now with you, but in French on the podcast. And then they were there at the Mazan trial. This woman
Yes.
who was
Yeah.
raped. I
Yeah.
mean, there were 70 guys raping her, and
Yeah.
and she was being filmed by her husband, and it's a terrible story.
Yeah.
And but we don't seem to have learned anything from it in France, because now in the new law about against rape, they're going to put consent, and I think that's ridiculous, because how can you prove you didn't consent? And it'll
Yeah.
go on being word against word, your word against mine. Anyway, and well, there's not much. People are not really concerned about transgenderism in France. Generally.
Mm. And the
It
terrible
was
thing, I guess, is I mean, is the far right, so Marine Le Pen, they're like other far right organizations, they're actually some of the people who believe you can't change sex. Is that correct? Or is even
well,
the French
they
far
don't.
right pro-trans?
I think they just, don't avoid talking about it. But they've got some gay men now amongst the prominent people, the far right.
Mm,
So now they can't look homophobic,
mm,
but they don't say anything about the rest of it. And if there are lesbians among them, we don't know it. I mean,
mm,
they haven't come out, so I don't know. And no, it's the far left and the Greens. They've both this ideology,
mm.
really. And it is worrying because the European policies, I think, are pushing for, self
Yeah. Yeah.
declaration and all this.
Well, Annie, I think I might get the other speakers on if it's okay. And
Yeah,
then
it's all
is that
right. I'm
and
finished.
then
No, I'm finished.
yeah,
But
well, we'll
I just one last thing I want
yeah,
to
go on.
say
Yeah,
that I think the just my conclusion that the WDI, it's both a place of learning for me and a place of action, and I think it links, theory and practice, which is very good. That's it. I'm finished.
fantastic. I
Thank you.
totally agree. Well, it's fantastic that you're around and involved. So yeah, welcome. I mean, you've been active for months now, but it is really wonderful and it's lovely to hear that you feel you've come home. So
Yeah,
welcome
I
home.
do. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bienvenue, Annie. Okay, right. So we're going to now talk to our next speaker, who is Karen Browne, and Karen Browne is from Ireland, and Karen Browne lives in the west of Ireland and has had a lifelong interest in women's rights. She's a member of Let Women Speak and believes that taking action is most important, whether through stickering, talking to people, engaging with government, or using social media. Living with disabilities, she's also interested in how these experiences affect women. Her main interests are creative writing, reading, and drawing. And Karen, it's welcome, and thank you so much for coming and speaking to us. And
Thanks for having
you,
me.
when you filled in the form about why did you sign the declaration, you said the sex-based rights of women and girls have been destroyed in my country. So yeah, so thank you so much. And so yeah, maybe you can tell us a bit about sort of why you signed the declaration and what's going on in Ireland.
Well, a bit of just back
Yeah,
on how it came in Ireland
yeah,
is we had in 2015 marriage equality referendum, which was hugely popular. Everyone was delighted, but on the quiet, attached to it was the Gender Recognition Act. Nobody knew about it. It wasn't publicly discussed because they knew it would be incredibly unpopular. And really, most of us, we were oblivious until I bumped into something. I came across something on, I think it was Twitter, and I thought, I'm going to have a look at this. And they've conflated the language of sex and gender so much that it makes single sex provision is gone. Now, I don't view it that way. To me, the Equality Acts say that I am entitled to single sex provision, so I'll defend it and I'll fight for it. But technically, and I've yet to get an answer out of government departments about the status of single sex provision in Ireland for women and girls, because they can't answer the question. And I always bring it back to CEDAW. Like, Ireland is a signatory. How are you meeting your obligations if being a woman means nothing anymore? Growing up, I was one of those kids who liked reading rather than going outside and playing. So I found, the Pankhursts and like all these amazing women. And Ireland, like I didn't put it in, I'm 45 now. So I grew up in the 80s, and that was a very dark time in Ireland, especially for women. And more comes out, like women have always been stomped on. And the worst part is we all got the vote in 1922 in the Free State, same as men, no bar. But then in 1937 for the Constitution, the then president and a Catholic bishop basically stripped women of work. You were basically tied to the home. If you married, you couldn't work. So if you had a passion for whatever and chose to follow it, you were automatically a spinster for life. So
And so
all that,
was that 1937? They changed the law and said if you got married, you
that's,
had to leave a job.
yeah, they brought in the marriage bar, and
Yeah.
it stayed until the 1970s. My mother missed it by a hair's breadth. And so she was able to go in and teach. But it was very much, like I remember my mother told me she'd be churched. After me, she refused for my younger siblings to be churched. But she said she had to be churched growing up. She said the church rules everything. But gradually, you know, when all the scandals started to come out about the Magdalen laundries and what was done to women and girls and children stolen, that it changed the position of the church in Ireland completely. But it still feels like we've gone from the church as the boss to, in 2015, basically two gay men. The Prime Minister was our first gay Prime Minister, and of course was the Green Party. Roderick O'Gorman engineered this Gender Recognition Act, and they were quietly working in the background all the time to undermine it until women started to think, what's going on here? Why are they trying to remove mother from maternity legislation?
Yeah, that was a
couldn't.
key moment, wasn't it?
It was.
Everybody woke up on
And it
that
was
mother
like,
thing.
then you think, yeah, okay, we'll get somewhere now. And it just, after it was nothing. We recently had a presidential election. The candidate who won is far left. She had a TRA attached to her the whole time around. She would not answer what is a woman. She just stood there. She couldn't, it was like, it's an intelligent, educated woman. Granted, she's Marxist, but she still knows what a woman is, but wouldn't say it. But she has a man pretending to be a woman, speaking for her all the time. And this individual, when he was a student in Trinity, went around removing all the women's symbols from the bathrooms.
Wow.
So that they wouldn't know where to go or where you were going. And increasingly, it just feels like there's more tension. You see, I never thought, you know, you see your first AGP, but they're surrounded by women. And women are defending these men. And I can't get my head around it. But then I think, no, they've been through an educational system. The schools here it's a disgrace. The program is called, it's Cnáltas. It's Irish for kindness.
Oh, God.
Yeah, Cnáltas, no. But there's no opt-out. So schools you're in and that's it. And now there's huge thing, well, I should be allowed to opt out for my child.
Yeah.
So there's is being pushed on kids from 4 to 5 years old. The whole way through primary school and into secondary school. But it's coming into parents too. So I had a conversation with a first cousin. And he was saying something, but you know, God, if one of mine turned out to be born in the wrong body. I said, well, nobody is born in the wrong body. And where's a 9-year-old hearing the term born in the wrong body in the first place? But they couldn't even comprehend that that's a myth. And I tried to go and look up a psychiatrist or Dr. Az. That's not how your mind works. And it's in your mind. I know universities are very bad. It's a long time since I was university, but I had a friend who went back and she's lesbian. And she said the level of transgender was shocking, but she put it up to them. She was having none of it, like strong woman. But she was blacklisted from every society. She was hauled up in front of the dean for stating her opinion. And the last straw was, she said, they out of the lesbian society while they were welcoming in men.
Wow. So terrible. So it's really quite bad. We're feeling as if we're having advances in UK, and then in United States there's lots of progress. But
I'm so jealous.
Yes. So it's really going badly in Ireland, you'd say?
It is. It's like they can't get traction. Like there was another case last week, I think it was an English man to do with a child. But they came out, RTE, that's our national broadcaster, used the phrase her sperm 26 times.
Oh my God, no.
Oh, come on, lads. This has to be, no one can take this seriously. But there'll be a couple of articles published on gender ideology, and that'll be it. And it goes quiet. And it's hard to get people to, like, I like action. So if I go out, I always have either, if it's fine enough, I'll have a jumper that has adult human female or whatever. A mark, like an emblem of resistance. I say no. I do not consent to this nonsense. And I won't. Or every bathroom I go into gets a sticker for women only, single sex facility. Or to just say, it's like I've got cursed at because I've a Birdie Rose tote bag with a J.K. Rowling quote. And it's young ones, but I actually managed to stop her and just say, why do you feel that you have the right to curse at another woman? And she's like, you're one of them turfy people. I said, yes, so you've your freedom to speak, I should have my freedom. I'm actually fighting for your rights.
Yeah.
In 10 years, you look back and you'll think very differently about what you were doing for the benefit of men.
Yeah.
I said, they are men. There's no two ways about it.
Well, I'm thinking that we should move on to our next speaker, who's Ali. And it's fantastic to talk to you, and it's really interesting. I mean, terrible what's going on in Ireland, but really thank you for sharing with us, and it's also inspiring what you're doing. If we get Ali on, if anybody has
It's lovely to speak.
Yes, yeah, it's really good. So we'll get Ali on, and then who's from Minnesota in the United States, and then we'll get everybody back on together. So if you have any questions for Karen, then put them in the chat or Q&A, and then we'll get you back on in about 10 minutes, and then we'll all chat together. Brilliant. Okay, so we're going to now talk to, thank you so much for our next speaker, who is Ali, and she's Ali McGee from the United States. She's a female business owner and a founder of a mental health clinic that is thriving despite her near-fatal motorcycle accident in 2020. Despite her own mother's contemplation of abortion in 1969 and her own pregnancy out of wedlock, 1994, she's the mother of 2 adult children and soon to be 2 grandchildren. She knows personally the battle of living with mental illness as a trauma survivor of sexual abuse and narcissistic abuse. And I'm just going to go on to what you said when we asked, why did you sign the declaration, saying, being a woman is incredible. Our bodies divinely created to hold and nurture and protect life itself from conception to birth of each and every person who's now fighting about what a woman is. For men to believe they can have babies among all the other rights they think they can have speaks to their jealousy. Women have fought hard for their rights, and we will continue as we come together stronger. So it's really a brilliant statement, and it's very inspiring what you said when you answered. But Ali, welcome. And can you tell us about why you signed the declaration and why you believe this sort of struggle is important?
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. I am just feeling really on fire and excited to be hanging out with women who know how to say the word women and celebrate us. I just first of all want to thank Karla and Annie and Karen. You guys just were amazing. And Joe, thank you for inviting me to this. I feel really illiterate to all the books and the authors and the language that all of you are using. And as I'm sitting here sort of contemplating all of this and where I've landed in this group of women, is that I feel accepted, even though I don't really know a lot of what you're talking about. But I feel like I'm a woman who has lived a woman's life, and I don't want to be minimized anymore. You know, I've been married. I did the marriage thing. I've been raped. I've been sexually abused, and just trying to survive in this world. And I had this really interesting. So I signed the declaration because it felt like, oh my gosh, this is a group of people where I can share something that I have, my story of pain and hurt, and coming alongside other women who are trying to find their way, and however they do that, right? And we're all trying to find our way, but to be minimized as a group of people is we're just naming that, and I appreciate definitions because they give us a place to begin. They give us a place for shared language. We need foundational truth. One thing I loved that President Trump did here in the United States is he said, okay, enough with this. There are men and there are women. He created them male and then he created them female. Like, let's just drop all this stuff. And I really so appreciated that. But anyway, I wanted to say something here. I thought it was interesting that in all of what I wrote to you guys is that I never mentioned I was a social worker. I was trained as a social worker in the early 90s, and so to have fought my whole life for the oppressed, and then to have them sort of turn on me because I'm white, and I was like, what's happening? Like you kind of bump into these. I think we've all shared this sort of crazy language. It's like something is being pushed at us that we are to believe in something that doesn't resonate with the truth of who we are. And the place I've sort of landed recently is to make a dividing line between what we're seeing is evil. There's evil that's infiltrating good. And so as we get confused or upset or like we're hearing these ridiculous things about, you know, rape and trying to define it as whether it's consensual or not, right? Like we're just talking about evil. That's what that is. It is evil and it is not of good. And that's just sort of a, maybe I'm trying to find a foundational place to where to begin. Where do we begin with this? We have to name it. We have to define it. We have to sort of know what we're talking about. And that's not to spark disagreements or infiltrate infighting. It's, can we have some shared language so that we can grow together and support one another? And then I wanted to, and then I'm more than happy to go into any kind of questions, but I've just been so stirred up by all the conversation. I'm just so excited. I wanted to speak to something about the word feelings. It came up a couple of times, and I, as a psychotherapist, I was a psychotherapist for over 10 years, maybe 15 before my accident. And I was trained in something called cognitive behavioral therapy. And one thing that I took from that treatment is that feelings, I'm just going to say a little blip. It goes like this. Feelings are neither good nor bad, they just are. But what leads to a feeling is a thought. Okay, so thoughts can be defined as good or bad. Feelings are not defined as good or bad. But if we have a thought first and then a feeling, that leads to a behavior. And behaviors can be defined as good or bad. So if I go to steal lipstick because I want to look pretty to go out for dinner, and I think it's okay, I think it's okay for me to steal lipstick because I don't have money, but I want to go out for dinner and I want to look pretty. That's based on my thoughts and my behavior. So now I get arrested and I'm angry. I'm angry at the police. I'm angry at, how dare you? I deserved this lipstick, right? Like my thoughts and my behavior can, in fact, be defined as good or bad. But the feelings I have in the middle are just this place of it's like a thermometer. It's a temperature to what's going on inside of us, but the feeling itself is not good or bad. It helps us to understand, well, gee, what were you thinking about before you felt that? Well, what did you do after you felt that? Do is behavior, think is before. So we've generated all these thoughts. We're all being taught different thoughts. Our schools are full of all this teaching, right? And that's giving thoughts to these young children and these colleges and these people. They're coming out indoctrinated with thoughts that are being put into the system to teach people how to think. We've lost critical thought. We've lost the ability to think for ourselves. Christianity has been demoralized and made. And don't get me wrong, Christianity and there's cults, right? Like people use that for terrible, terrible things. So when I ever speak about Christianity or anything like that, it's from studying the scriptures of the Holy Bible and trying to get a foundation, just a foundation. Uh-oh. You look like
I'm
you're
just, yeah,
talking.
I
Joe.
am talking. Yeah, I'm just going to
Yeah.
come in because you're saying quite a lot of things, and some of them are just coming back to this stuff about the thoughts
Yes.
that really links in with schools teaching kids loads of thoughts, and then their feelings. Then they come up with this, oh, I feel as if I'm, say a girl says, I feel like I'm a boy, and then they support them in their transitioning or trying to actually be a boy. So I think that's really, really, it helps clarify things in terms of that progression, and it links up very much to a lot of what we've been saying and this prioritization of feelings. Just to sort of like basically many of the people or women here at WDI tend to be not really, many of us are not really religious, and just so we tend to sort of not think prioritize sort of promoting it.
I respect it.
Yeah, and then also many of us don't are very concerned about Trump in that he's not really pro women in many ways. So I think, I mean, you're right that he did Trump did redefine and has made some good advances for women's sex-based rights, but possibly not coming from the same angle of defending women, but more sort of wanting women back in their place. But anyway, what I think I'm going to do is because we're coming near to the end, is get the others back on, and then we can have a bit of discussion about if they've got any questions to answer. So we'll get everybody, if possible, back on and go back. But thank you so much, Ali. Thank you for joining us and for being with us. And it is just absolutely brilliant that as WDI we're able to provide a sort of place for women who believe you can't change sex, to have space. And I suppose we were talking earlier before we started about how often when we say something about you can't change sex, people just stop talking and change the subject. And this is definitely a place where you're allowed to say something and then the conversation develops and we say, oh, I agree with you on that, or whatever, so you don't get shut down, and we really develop the conversation. Anyway, look, I'm going to go back to Karla first and then go back to everybody as everybody spoke. So Karla, did you see any questions to answer, or have you got any sort of following up for Ali or Annie or Karen, any points?
I think there's one about, I'm not sure it's a question, just comments is what I guess I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So nothing that you could see. Have you looked in the Q&A? I thought
yeah, that's where I'm looking.
Yeah. Oh, well, I've got something in the Q&A here that I'll read it to you. It's from Sasha. It says, Karla, I am filled with awe at your analysis. Please come to the breakout rooms afterwards. Lots of women here will have further questions for you.
All right.
Good, thanks. Okay, and then there's a question, I don't know who this is for, but I'll read it out and we can see if someone wants to answer it. This is from Anne-Louise. As the word gender is being used by trans activists as a feeling, and they can't define it, and consequently 1970s feminist definition of gender is beaten down or warped, is it potentially a good plan to try generally to get rid of the use of the word gender? What do we think of that? So maybe if we start off with Karla and see what everyone else thinks.
I've noticed in France that now they use gender all the time instead of sex, and in French, genre doesn't mean sex, never. And they're using it even in government publications and things. And I
So
think
what did you use for sex? Was it sex, le sex?
Yes, sex. Yeah.
And that's
sex
being
club.
and now people are just using
Oh
gender.
no, gender all the time. And even
very bad.
people who are critical of gender ideology use gender. So I think it's wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we don't have a word for woman face either, which I think we should find. I love that word,
Yeah.
woman face,
In French, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I really don't know what we could use to translate, because we don't have a word for blackface either. So
yeah,
we have we did have the same.
Visage and femme.
Yeah, yes, but it doesn't mean anything.
Well, we could make it mean something.
Maybe.
Somebody, yeah, go on.
Comes at me going on about gender this and gender that.
Yeah.
I always just ask them, what's that based on? What is gender based on?
Oh, that's
They
good.
can't answer because they have to say, well, the only place
yes.
gender exists is up here. And the only thing that's really real is sex. I know what that's based on. We all do. Even if
That's a great question. What is it based on? That's really
Yeah,
good. I'm
and
not sure we can get rid of the word gender because we need to name the part that's about, what we're trained as being female and male, or what we're feminine and masculine, all that. We need a word for that. But the problem is the words get corrupted.
And they're twisted.
Twisted.
Like, I'd just love if it was men can be as feminine as they want, women can be as masculine as they want. Who cares? You're still men and you're still women. Or
but because of gender, that's all confused, right? Because they mix sex and gender, that they get all confused, and then they think, well, if you're masculine, you must be a man.
Yeah. And it's like there's Ken and there's Barbie. There's no Ken or Barbie. We're all in the middle.
There is good, I mean, Beauty and Misogyny by Sheila Jeffries, we talked about some of her books, is very good, and a couple of other books where she talks about gender actually, and her book Gender Hurts, where gender actually damages, is a form of oppression. Gender is the way that women are oppressed.
It is.
So that it's not just it's okay to perform masculinity or femininity. We want to get rid of both of them, which I think makes lots of sense, because one of the trans rights activists I talk to says that she thinks just performing different genders is a form of liberation, whereas getting rid of it seems to be a better way forward.
I think we'd all be better off. I think men would be better off.
Yeah.
As well, if they weren't trying to.
Yeah.
Because they're being told you have to be a certain way. The same as women are told, you have to be this, or you have to be thin, or you have to be pretty, or you have to wear makeup. Like, the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
Well, we've partitioned human qualities into two different boxes. And some of those qualities we need to get rid of. And some of them we need to make accessible to everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's another question here. This is a question for Karen. Is Karen working to help to get rid of gender teaching out of the public schools? And I suppose other people might be able to talk about that as well. Like,
the problem, like, there is an advocacy group in Irish Out the Countess, but the trouble with it's a huge thing now in education here. Like, you can object, like, but I think it basically comes down to, in order for the government to listen, or the Department of Education, and get rid of the LGBTQ plus teachers group within the union, because it all comes from them. Parents have to stand up, march into the school and say, not my child will not be taught this. It's inappropriate for a 5-year-old. And I think, mothers are the most common at the school gates. They're so used to mom comes in, that fathers, if they're there, or whatever, good relationship, whatever the case may be, if there's a man there, they pay more heed if the man comes in and says, my son, my daughter will not be taught this, and she will be exited out of the class.
Yeah.
Or threaten go to the Board of Management, or as high up as you can go. That's the only way I think that's going to work here. Because
get it out to schools. Yeah. Well, look, we're coming to the end, so I just want to go back to everybody and see if they've got a final thing to say. So I'm going to go in the order that you spoke. So Karla, what would be your last final thing you want to tell everybody?
Just, I think it's important to look at the ways we embed some of these ideas in our basic thinking without taking it apart and analyzing it. And that's what feminist analysis is about.
Brilliant. Great. Well, how about you, Annie?
Well, I wanted to say that even in one of our members of WDI France, when she's a teacher, and somebody wrote an anonymous letter to her boss, to say that she was homophobic and everything. So I think we should really defend all people like that. I agree with Karen, really. People must stand up for their kids and because they don't seem really concerned in France yet, but
yeah, great. Okay, I
I'm
think that's very
worried
good
about
advice.
it.
Perfect. Okay, let's go to Karen.
I just keep saying no. If you have, just say no. I don't consent.
Perfect.
To
Great.
your presence.
Yeah, that's really good.
Just say no.
Ali, how about you? What are your final thoughts that you want to tell us?
Thank you. I hope to be invited back, despite the fact that I sort of blew up the chat with a couple of comments. I think we all have important things to say, and I think back to the feeling thing is that as I feel sort of maybe attacked, or that other people feel attacked because I used a particular name of a particular president. I think it's important to recognize that whatever that feeling is in us is because we've been taught a thought about that person. So I have different thoughts about him than you have thoughts about him, and that's okay, because we're still learning. And so how can I express love and appreciation to all of you as you do unto me, and we just find our way. None of us want to be oppressed or hurt or injured, and if we get upset at people who we think oppressed and hurt other people, we've often been hurt. We have often are so wounded, and so we see the wounding in another person and we can get distracted. So we need to attend to our own wounds. Many of us are trauma survivors, and we share a common thread of wanting to be seen and heard and understood and loved and appreciated. So I think and then one little tiny thing.
Go on.
I've had so many female friends in my life where we've ended up in this place of our conversation where we say, I'm not attracted to you sexually, but God, I wish you were my partner. Like, I wish I could just live with you. If our husbands die, can we just live together? Because I think we just long to connect and have somebody hear us and listen to us. And I'm so excited to be hanging out with people who know how to ramble on and on, because my last husband, and I swear I'm almost done. My last husband, when I would be a woman, his language to me was, can you just talk with less words? Like, don't say so much. And I was like,
like not say anything probably he wanted. Or just repeat what he says.
That's a new one.
Yeah. So I'm just, it's like, oh, I get to know what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, I think these are really important conversations, and I'm sure lots of people in the chat can think of loads of things to follow on from that. It's very, very stimulating, and